Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Sly, and on behalf of Sean LaRocca, our composer, and Millicent Johnny, our choreographer, I'm here to talk to you about a project called Cry You One. We're from South Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana. It's a place that's disappearing faster than any region in the known world. And Cry You One is a project about that disappearing land, about the people who live on that land, and about what's being done to save it. And so the maps that you're about to see right now start us with the story of the creation of that land. And they explain how over 7,000 years the Mississippi River ran wild, pushing amazing amounts of land-building sediment to the shores of the Gulf of Mexico. And this was just a really dynamic, fluid process that created the coastal landscape that we now know. In the last century, we placed levees around the Mississippi River for flood control and navigational purposes. And through the unregulated dredging of canals by the oil and gas industry, humankind's placed a very rigid industrial set of ideas on what was a dynamic system. So in 7,000 years that nature took to build this land, it's taken us a little less than 70 to eliminate it. Today, our coastal landscape, including New Orleans, it houses one of the most rich and diverse cultures in the world. And every year we lose 25 square miles of coast right now. To be clear, that's an area the size of Manhattan. And this land loss is racing to a really tragic conclusion, which most experts say could equal the largest forced migration in the United States history. That's a picture of the land loss map, with the red areas being what is going to disappear in 40 years. And that would put the Gulf of Mexico at the back door of New Orleans. And so the state has enacted a coastal restoration master plan that solely focuses on engineering and science. And what this project is doing is filtering that plan through an artistic lens in order to give a more nuanced, three-dimensional picture of what's happening in our home. This is work we've been doing since 2006. Started with a production called Beneath the Strata. In 2009, we continued with a performance called Loup-Garou, both large-scale, site-responsive work about coastal land loss. And it's led us to a place called the Central Wetlands, which we're working today. This is 11 miles south of New Orleans, and the area you're looking at has been starved of fresh water. And so these trees right here were alive 40 years ago. In fact, the locals tell us that was a cypress forest so dense 40 years ago you couldn't see the sun through the trees. And so we're on this landscape, on a levee system, and Cry You One takes the form of a procession. Inspired by the jazz funerals in New Orleans, where we take a body and we parade it through the streets to celebrate the life of the deceased with music and food and storytelling, we've created a 2-mile procession that tells a story of South Louisiana on this landscape using poetry, song, movement, imagined stories to let people go to the place where we're most affected here in Louisiana and see it for themselves. It's participatory, like a second line or like a jazz funeral, where the audience is part of the whole production. In May, we had a working process where we experimented with a number of ideas, like pulling audience members off the levee into smaller playing areas, letting them interact with the visual world and doing direct action on the land, and then just telling stories and sharing dreams of the people who used to live on this land, and asking ourselves the question, what's going to happen to these cultural traditions when the land that sustains them disappears? And then we're teaching them songs, like the one Sean taught all our amazing Creative Capital colleagues in just 2 days. When you're marching down the levee, something amazing happens. It's the dramaturgy of the land changes drastically. You see all this green right here. This is because at the end of our procession, we're marching you to this. It's a small-scale rainwater diversion where they're pumping fresh water back in the marsh, and it's feeding a starved marsh, and it's all coming back to life. And this is actually one of the state's plans to save coastal Louisiana. So we want to bring people to this, to let them see for themselves what the future is going to look like, to ask questions, etc. Our project, in addition to being a live performance, has a digital storytelling component. We're releasing a website in September 18th, where we're featuring recorded stories of people directly affected by this. Like this man right here, Mr. T. Black. He's a third-generation Creole tomato farmer. And we're letting these stories influence our process, but we're also using them to share with a wider audience who may not be able to come to the performance. And so the things that we need the most, the project premieres in October this year. We're going to tour in the summer of 2014. We have some generous support from the National Theater Project, NEFA. We are looking for presenting partners throughout the country. But we also want people to come to South Louisiana and witness for yourself with your own eyes. I know it's not a hard sell to get you to come to New Orleans, y'all. So we want people to see it for themselves, to witness it. We're looking for more digital platforms to share the recorded stories. So those of you who know about innovative digital platforms and funding, Creative Capital, Alternate Roots, the MAP Grant, and NEFA have been generously funding this project, but we want to extend the life through 2015. And I just want to say, this is a site-responsive work. And so we're responding to an issue that's really important to us. But the reason we're touring this is because we want the project to live in response to the disastrous consequences when we try to control nature. But we want to do it with our own brand of celebration and humor and cooking and food, because as they say in New Orleans, we put the fun in funeral. So we just want y'all to remember that and join on with us. So thank you very much.